The warning came at midnight. Earth time. Ambassador Do-Yun Lee stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Assembly, watching the massive holographic display flicker with red emergency signals. Around him, representatives from 34 species spoke in worried voices. Their translators filled the air with a strange music of fear. "The outer rim has gone dark," said the Villani elder, his pale blue skin shimmering under the lights. 17 colonies. No survivors. No signals, nothing. Do-Yun had served humanity for 20 years. He had seen wars, plagues, and disasters, but he had never seen the Villani afraid. They were the oldest species in the galaxy. They had watched stars die and civilizations rise. Now their hands trembled. What attacked them? Do-Yun asked. The elder's eyes met his. The silence. The name spread through the chamber like poison. Species that had been talking stopped. Those who had been sitting stood up. Do-Yun noticed the Kalori delegates already moving toward the exit. "The silence is a myth," said a young Dranathi representative. "A story to scare children?" "It was real once," the Villani elder replied. 10,000 years ago it consumed everything in its path. We thought it was dead. We were wrong. The holographic display changed. It showed a massive fleet of black ships, each one covered in strange symbols that seemed to move and twist. They did not fire weapons. They simply touched other ships, and those ships went dark. Their crews vanished. Their systems died. "They are coming," the elder said. "They will be here in 6 months." For a moment no one moved. Then the Kalori ambassador stood. "We are leaving," he announced. "Our fleet will withdraw to the far rim. We suggest others do the same." "You cannot run from the silence," Do-Yun said. "They will follow. They always follow." The Kalori did not answer. They simply walked out. Within an hour, 20 species had recalled their fleets. The great chamber, once filled with hundreds of delegates, became empty. Do-Yun watched them go, one by one. The Villani were the last to leave. The elder stopped at the door and looked back. "I am sorry," he said. "We are old. We are tired. We cannot fight anymore." "Then who will?" Do-Yun asked. The elder had no answer. He walked away, and the door closed behind him. Do-Yun stood alone in the chamber. The holographic display still showed the silence, spreading across the map like a dark stain. He thought about his home, Earth, a small blue planet that had only discovered space travel 200 years ago. Humanity was the youngest species in the assembly. They had no ancient wisdom. They had no great fleets. They had only themselves. He activated his communicator. "Admiral Choi, this is Ambassador Lee. We have a problem." Admiral Hannah Choi received the message at Luna Command. She was 57 years old, with gray hair and steady hands. She had fought in 3 wars and lost count of how many soldiers had died under her command. When she heard what had happened, she did not panic. She simply called a meeting. 12 hours later, every military leader on Earth sat in her command center. The room was quiet. They had all seen the footage. They all knew what was coming. "The assembly is gone," Hannah said. "The other species have fled. We are alone." Then we should flee too," said a young general. "We can take our people to the far rim. Hide? Wait." "Wait for what?" Hannah asked. "The silence does not stop. It does not sleep. It does not negotiate. If we run, we die tired. And if we fight?" another officer asked. "We die anyway." Hannah looked around the room. She saw fear in their eyes, but she also saw something else. Something stubborn. Something human. "Maybe," she said. "But we die standing." The vote was not required by law, but Hannah wanted everyone to choose for themselves. She asked a simple question: do we run or do we fight? Every hand rose for fight. Every single one. Far away on the carrier ship Defiance, Captain Taeho Kim received his orders. He read them twice. Then he walked to the bridge and looked at his crew. They were young. Most of them had never seen real combat. They did not know what was coming. "We have new orders," he said. The fleet is not retreating. We are holding position. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Una Park, looked up from her console. Holding position against what, Captain? Tai-Ho showed her the footage. The black ships. The dying colonies. The spreading darkness. Una watched in silence. When it was over, she turned back to her console and began running calculations. What are you doing? Tai-Ho asked. Finding their weakness, she said. Everything has a weakness. Tai-Ho almost smiled. This was why he had chosen her. While others saw death, Una saw a problem to solve. Sir, said a young ensign named Jiwan-O, are we really going to fight that? Tai-Ho looked at the holographic image of the silence. It was vast. It was terrifying. It was coming for everything he loved. Yes, he said. We are... On Earth, in a small apartment in Seoul, a mother held her daughter and watched the news. The broadcast spoke of unity, courage, and hope. But the mother knew the truth. She knew that humanity was about to fight a war it could not win, and yet, when her daughter asked if they would be okay, she said yes, because that was what humans did. They stood. They fought. They hoped, even when hope was all they had left. 3 months passed. The galaxy grew quiet. Captain Tai-Ho Kim stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, in the endless darkness, the silence was moving closer. He could not see them yet, but he could feel them like a cold wind before a storm. Captain, said Lieutenant Una Park, stepping onto the deck, we have incoming ships. 37 vessels. Tai-Ho turned sharply. Enemy? No, sir, refugees. The ships were old and broken. They carried families from Villani colonies, Kalori traders, Dranathi workers, thousands of ordinary people whose governments had abandoned them. They had nowhere else to go. Tai-Ho watched them approach. Part of him felt anger. These were the people of the species that had run away. Why should humanity protect them? But another part of him, a deeper part, knew the answer. Because that was who humans were. They did not leave people behind. Open the landing bays, he ordered. All of them. Within hours, the Defiance was filled with alien refugees. They were scared and tired. Many had lost their homes. Some had lost their families. They looked at the human crew with confusion in their eyes. Why are you helping us? Asked a young Villani named Ori. He was barely an adult with bright golden eyes that reminded Tai-Ho of his own son. Your species owes us nothing. We left you to die. Your leaders left us? Tai-Ho said. You didn't? Ori stared at him for a long moment. Then he lowered his head. Thank you. On Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, Dr. Sujin Wang worked without sleep. Her laboratory was filled with pieces of silence technology, fragments collected from destroyed scout ships. She studied them day and night, searching for a weakness. Her team had given up hope weeks ago. But Sujin refused to stop. She believed that every machine had a flaw. Every system had a crack. She just needed to find it. On the 47th day, she did. There, she whispered, staring at her screen. There it is. The silence communicated through a specific frequency, a signal that connected all their ships together. If that signal was disrupted, even for a moment, the ships would stop working, but there was a problem. To broadcast the disruption, a ship would need to get extremely close to the enemy. So close that survival was almost impossible, so Jin sent her findings to Admiral Hanna. The Admiral read the report and nodded slowly. Almost impossible is not impossible, she said. Keep working. On Mars, Sergeant Minho Beek trained his soldiers. The 7th Orbital Drop Battalion was the best ground force humanity had. They had fought in every major conflict since the colony wars. Now they prepared for something none of them had ever faced. The silence uses ground troops, Minho told them. Machine soldiers. They do not feel pain. They do not feel fear. They do not stop until you destroy them completely. A young soldier raised her hand. How do we fight something like that? Minho smiled, though there was no joy in it. We fight harder. We fight smarter. And we never, ever give up? That night he stood alone on the Martian surface, watching evacuation ships carry civilians to safety, families, children, the people he was sworn to protect. He lit a cigarette and took a long breath. The war had not truly started yet, but he could already feel its weight. He thought about his mother, back on Earth. He thought about the letters he had never sent, the calls he had never made. "Come back alive," she had said. The last time he saw her. "I'll try," he had answered. Now, watching the ships disappear into the dark sky, he was not sure he could keep that promise on the Defiance. Ensign Jiwan-O found Ori sitting alone in the cargo bay. The young Villani was staring at a small holographic image of his family. "Are they safe?" Jiwan asked, sitting beside him. "I don't know," Ori admitted. "They were supposed to be on the last transport out of our colony, but the transport never arrived." Jiwan was quiet for a moment. She was only 23, barely older than Ori. She had joined the fleet because she wanted to see the stars. She never expected to fight in a war. "Why didn't your people stay?" she asked. "Why did they run?" Ori's golden eyes dimmed. "Our leaders said it was logical. The silence cannot be defeated. Fighting was pointless. But you don't believe that." "No." Ori looked at her. "I watched your captain take in refugees. I watched your soldiers share their food with strangers. Your people barely have enough for themselves, but you still give." He shook his head slowly. "My people forgot how to do that. We are old. We are wise. But we forgot what it means to care." Jiwan placed a hand on his arm. "Maybe you can remember?" Lieutenant Yuna worked through the night, planning what she called the Phalanx Protocol. It was a desperate strategy. Human ships would act as bait, drawing the silence into narrow attack corridors. While the enemy focused on them, other ships would strike from unexpected angles. The plan required perfect timing. One mistake and the entire formation would collapse. Yuna ran the simulation 100 times, then 1,000. Each time she found small improvements. Each time she got a little closer to something that might work. Captain Taiho found her still working at dawn. "Have you slept?" he asked. "No, you should." Yuna looked up from her console. Her eyes were red with exhaustion. "They're coming, Captain. Every hour I sleep is an hour I'm not preparing." Taiho sat down beside her. "You cannot save anyone if you collapse before the battle." She was silent for a moment. Then slowly she nodded. 2 hours, she said. "Then I'm back to work." Taiho smiled. "That's all I ask." The next morning, the first silent scout ships appeared at the edge of human space. They did not attack. They simply watched, waiting, counting. Captain Taiho stood on his bridge, looking at the enemy for the first time. The black ships hung in the darkness like ghosts. "All hands," he announced over the ship's communication system. "The war has begun. Report to battle stations." Across human space, millions of soldiers heard similar orders. They said goodbye to their families. They wrote their last letters. They prepared to face an enemy that had never been defeated, and somewhere in the chaos, a young Villani named Ori approached the Defiance's recruitment office. "I want to fight," he said. "With you. For you, please." The officer looked at him for a long moment. Then she handed him a uniform. "Welcome to the fleet." The silence came to Proxima Centauri on a Tuesday. 200 ships, each one darker than the space around it, appeared without warning. They did not announce themselves. They did not demand surrender. They simply began moving toward the human colony of Newbie USAN. Captain Taiho Kim had 47 ships. Less than a quarter of the enemy force. Every officer on his bridge knew the math. They were going to lose, but none of them said it. "All ships," Taiho broadcast to the fleet. "This is Captain Kim. They have never fought something that refuses to die. Today we show them what fear feels like." The fleet moved into formation. The Phalanx Protocol was active. Every captain knew their position, their role, their sacrifice. They had trained for this moment for 3 months. Now it was real. The first shots came from the enemy. Beams of dark energy, colder than starlight, struck the forward ships. The destroyer Incheon exploded in a ball of fire. The cruiser Jeju lost its engines and began to drift. 3 ships gone in 10 minutes. They're too fast, Lieutenant Yuna reported, her fingers flying across her console. Our targeting systems can't track them. Taiho watched another ship die. The Seoul, 140 crew members? Gone in a flash. Then we don't track them, he said. We predict them. He opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, focus fire on a single target. The lead vessel. Everything we have. It was not standard tactics. Standard tactics said to spread your fire, damage multiple enemies, create confusion. But Taiho knew standard tactics would not work against the silence. 44 ships turned their weapons on one target. Missiles, plasma beams, kinetic rounds, everything. The combined fire was so bright it looked like a small sun. For a moment, nothing happened. The silent ship seemed to absorb the energy, its black hull glowing faintly. Then cracks appeared. The ship shuddered. Pieces began to break away, and then it exploded. The bridge of the Defiance erupted in cheers. It was one ship. One victory against an enemy of 200. But it was proof. The silence could die. Again, Taiho ordered. Next target. The battle lasted 6 hours, and Sain Jaewon-oh flew her fighter through a storm of death. Her squadron, the 12th Wing, had started with 20 pilots. Now there were 7. She weaved between debris and enemy fire, her hands steady even as her heart pounded. A silence fighter locked onto her tail. She could hear the warning alarm screaming. 3 seconds to impact. 2 seconds, 1 dot. She dove into a debris field, the wreckage of destroyed ships. The enemy followed, but it was not built for such chaos. It clipped a piece of metal and spun out of control. Jiwon did not look back. She simply kept flying. 12th Wing, came her commander's voice. Fall back to the Defiance. We need cover for the boarding team. Boarding team. Jiwon had almost forgotten. While the fleet fought outside, Sergeant Minho and his soldiers were attempting something insane. They were going to board a silence carrier and plant Dr. Sujin's disruption device inside. She turned her fighter and pushed the engines to maximum. On my way. Sergeant Minho had never been afraid of death, but walking through the corridors of a silence carrier made him feel something close to it. The walls were covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift when he was not looking. The air was cold, colder than any place he had ever been. And the sound, a constant whisper just at the edge of hearing, like voices begging for help. Stay focused, he told his team. We plant the device, we get out, simple. They reached the core of the ship in 20 minutes. What they found there changed everything. The core was not a machine. It was a graveyard. Thousands of pods lined the walls, each one containing a body. They were not human. They were not any species Minho recognized. But they had been people once. He could tell from the shapes of their faces, frozen in expressions of fear and pain. What is this? Whispered one of his soldiers. Minho moved closer to the pods. Each one had a cable running from it to the central computer. Data streams flowed back and forth. The bodies were dead, but something inside them was still alive. Still thinking. Still screaming. The silence, Minho said slowly. It's not just machines. It's them. They uploaded themselves. Their minds. Their memories. He touched the glass of the nearest pod. They've been alone for 10,000 years. Going mad. His communicator crackled. Sergeant, this is Defiance. Status report? Minho looked at the device in his hand. The disruption generator? It would shut down the silence, but now he understood what that meant. It meant killing the last survivors of a dead civilization. People who had been trapped in darkness for longer than humanity had existed. He pressed the activation button anyway. Device planted, he said. Get us out of here. The Defiance picked them up 30 seconds before the carrier went dark. The disruption wave spread outward, touching ship after ship. For a moment, the entire silence fleet stopped moving. All ships, Taiho broadcast. Attack now. Everything you have? Now, the human fleet struck with everything they had left. Silent ships, frozen and helpless, exploded one after another. In 20 minutes, the battle was over, humanity had won, but the cost was terrible. Captain Taiho stood in the hangar bay, watching body bags being loaded onto transports. 23 ships destroyed, 8,000 dead. Soldiers, pilots, engineers, sons and daughters, mothers and fathers. The price of one battle. Lieutenant Yuna approached him. She was injured, a bandage wrapped around her arm, but she refused to leave his side. "Sir," she said quietly, "what do we do now?" Taiho thought about the pods on the silence carrier, the trapped mines, the endless loneliness. He thought about his own people, celebrating a victory they did not fully understand. "We keep going," he said. "We push forward. We end this, and after that?" He looked at the stars beyond the hangar. Somewhere out there, more silent ships were waiting. More battles. More death. The war was not over. It had barely begun. "We remember them," he said. "All of them. The ones we lost and the ones we destroyed. We remember that they were alive once. Just like us." Jiwan found Ori in the refugee section. The young Villani was helping bandage wounded soldiers, his golden eyes tired but determined. "You survived," he said when he saw her. "Barely." She sat down beside him. "My squadron is gone. Most of them." Ori was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, don't be." She looked at her hands, still shaking from the battle. "They died fighting." "That's more than most people in this galaxy can say." Ori nodded slowly. Then he went back to work and Jiwan closed her eyes. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear celebrations, cheering, music, but she did not feel like celebrating. She felt tired, sad, older than she had been that morning. This was war, she realized. Not glory, not adventure. Just loss piled upon loss until there was nothing left. And yet, when the next battle came, she knew she would fight again, because that was what humans did. 6 months into the war, Earth was dying slowly. The factories worked day and night. The farms produced every grain they could. The mines dug deeper than ever before. But it was not enough. There were too many soldiers to feed, too many ships to build, too many battles to fight. Admiral Hannah Choi sat in her office at Luna Command looking at the reports. Food reserves were at 40%. Fuel was running low. Medical supplies were almost gone. Every week, the numbers got worse. She made the decision alone because she did not want anyone else to carry the weight. "Civilian rations will be reduced by half," she announced. "All non-essential activities will be suspended. Every resource goes to the war effort." The protests began within hours. People were hungry. People were scared. They had supported the war at first, but now they were tired. They wanted peace. They wanted to give up. Hannah understood. She was tired too. But she also knew that giving up meant death. Not just for humanity, but for everyone. The silence would never stop. It would consume the entire galaxy if no one stood against it. "Hold on," she whispered to herself. "Just a little longer." Ambassador Do-Yun Lee had a different plan. He took a small ship and flew to Villani space. It was a dangerous journey. The Villani had closed their borders. They did not want visitors. They did not want war, but Do-Yun did not come to beg for help. He came to show them the truth. He broadcast his message to every Villani world. It was simple. Just footage. Hours and hours of footage. Human soldiers feeding Villani children. Human doctors treating Villani wounded. Human ships protecting Villani refugees. Image after image of humanity caring for the people whose leaders had abandoned them. "We do not ask you to fight," Do-Yun said at the end. "We only ask you to watch. Watch what your people have become. Watch what we choose to be." The Villani leadership was furious. They ordered his ship destroyed. But before they could act, something happened. The people revolted on world after world. Ordinary Villani took to the streets. They had seen the footage. They had heard the stories. They were ashamed of what their leaders had done, and they wanted to make it right. Ships began defecting. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. They flew to human space offering their services, their weapons, their lives. "We were wrong," said a Villani captain when he arrived. "We will never be wrong again." The Villani were not the only ones who returned. The Kalori sent their medical corps, thousands of healers and scientists who had refused to abandon the galaxy to darkness. They worked alongside Dr. Sujin, developing new weapons and new defenses. The Dranathi sent their engineers. They were the best builders in the galaxy, and they helped rebuild the ships humanity had lost. They worked without rest, without pay, without thanks. They simply worked. Even the smaller species came. Traders and farmers, teachers and artists. People who had no military training but wanted to help somehow. They cooked meals. They carried supplies. They told jokes to tired soldiers. "Why are you here?" Captain Tejo asked a small group of Kalori volunteers. An old female looked at him with kind eyes. "Because you were here for us, when no one else was." The reformed Galactic Assembly met for the first time in 8 months. The chamber that had been empty was now filled again. Not with all 34 species. Some were still too afraid, but enough. Enough to make a difference. Ambassador Doyun stood at the center, looking at the faces around him. He had never expected this moment. He had never believed it was possible. "We are here," he said, "because one species showed us what courage looks like. They did not run. They did not hide. They stood alone against the darkness, and they fought. Now we stand with them." A Villani elder rose from her seat. She was ancient, her skin faded to pale silver, her eyes clouded with age. But her voice was strong. "We abandoned you," she said to Doyun. "You protected our children anyway. You fed our hungry. You healed our wounded." She paused, her voice breaking. "We will never flee again." The chamber erupted in cheers. But Captain Taiho did not hear them. He was on the bridge of the Defiance, receiving terrible news, his homeworld. Bizon colony. The Silence was heading toward it. Lieutenant Yuna, now promoted to commander and given her own ship, stood beside him. She knew what the order said. Taiho had to hold his current position. It was strategically vital. If he left, the entire defense line would collapse. "How long do they have?" Taiho asked quietly. 6 hours. 6 hours. His parents lived there. His sister. The neighborhood where he grew up. The school where he learned to read. 6 hours until it was all gone. "Sir," Yuna said, "we could send a message. Tell them to evacuate. There's no time." Taiho's voice was steady, but his hands shook. "The transport ships won't arrive before the Silence does." They stood in silence. The weight of command had never been heavier. "You could go," Yuna whispered. "I'll hold the line. You could save them." Taiho looked at her. She was offering to die for him. For his family. For a colony she had never seen. He thought about his mother. Her smile. Her voice. The last time he had held her hand. Then he thought about the millions of people depending on him to stay. The soldiers who trusted him. The refugees who had nowhere else to go. The entire galaxy watching to see if humanity would break. "No," he said. "I stay." 6 hours later, Bizon colony went dark. The Silence consumed everything. Everyone. Teho watched the reports in silence. He did not cry. He did not scream. He simply stood there, feeling a piece of himself die. Sergeant Minho found him later, alone in the observation deck. "I heard about Bizon," Minho said. "I'm sorry." Taiho did not answer at first. Then slowly he turned. "They died believing we would win," he said. "We have to make sure they were right." Minho nodded. He had lost people too. Everyone had. That was the price of war. "The assembly voted today," Minho said. "They're planning a final offensive. One big attack on the Silence Corps fleet." Taiho looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, the enemy was waiting. The thing that had taken everything from him. "Good," he said. "It's time to end this." The Battle of Seoul began at dawn. 3,000 silent ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system. They blocked out the stars, a wall of darkness stretching across the void. The largest fleet anyone had ever seen. The last army of a dead civilization, coming to end all life. Against them stood 1,200 allied ships. Human carriers and cruisers, Villani destroyers, Kalori medical vessels, Dranathi support craft. Every species that had returned now stood together at the edge of oblivion. Captain Taiho Kim looked at the enemy fleet and felt no fear. Only cold, quiet determination. All ships, he broadcast. This is the moment. Everything we have fought for, everything we have lost, comes down to today. They came here to end us. Let's show them how wrong they are. The fleets collided like two tidal waves. Ships exploded on both sides. Fire and metal filled the void. The Silence fought with cold efficiency, their weapons precise, their movements coordinated. The Allied fleet fought with something else. Desperation, fury, hope. Commander Una Park led her ship, the Last Dawn, through the chaos. She had studied the Silence for months. She knew their patterns, their weaknesses, their blind spots. Now she used that knowledge to cut through their formation like a knife. Target the command links, she ordered. Break their coordination. Her ship struck a Silence carrier, destroying its communication array. For a moment, the enemy ships around it hesitated. That moment was enough. Allied fighters swarmed in, tearing them apart. On the ground of the Silence command vessel, Sergeant Minho and his soldiers fought a different battle. The machine soldiers of the Silence were everywhere. They did not bleed. They did not scream. They simply kept coming, wave after wave, endless and relentless. Minho's battalion held the corridors with everything they had. Push forward, he shouted, firing his weapon until it overheated. We need to reach the core. A soldier beside him fell. Then another. Minho did not stop. He could not stop. The entire war depended on reaching that core. They made it through a wall of machine bodies. Captain Taiho was waiting at the entrance to the core chamber. He had taken a small team through a different route, meeting Minho at the objective. In his hands he carried Dr. Sujin's final weapon. A pulse generator that would shut down the Silence forever, but there was a cost. The pulse needs to be activated from inside the core, Sujin had explained. The person who does it will be caught in the blast. They won't survive. Taiho had volunteered immediately. No one argued. They knew he had lost too much to stop now. This is it, he said to Minho. Make sure you get your people out. Minho grabbed his arm. There has to be another way. There isn't. Taiho smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young man he had once been. Before the war. Before the losses. Before the weight of command had aged him. Take care of them, Minho, all of them. He walked into the core. The chamber was vast and dark, filled with the same pods he had seen before. Thousands of trapped minds, screaming in silence for 10,000 years. The heart of the Silence. The prison of a dead people. Taiho moved to the center. The whispers grew louder. He could hear their voices now. Not just screams, words. Help us, please. We are so tired. We are so alone. He stopped. His hand hovered over the activation switch. I know, he said softly. I know what it's like to be alone. To lose everyone you love. To feel like the universe has forgotten you. The whispers changed. Less angry. More curious. But you're not alone anymore, Taiho continued. And you don't have to keep fighting. You can rest now. We all can. He pressed the switch. The pulse expanded outward in a wave of light. It passed through the core, through the ship, through the entire Silence fleet. Everywhere it touched, the machines stopped. The pods went dark. The trapped minds finally, mercifully, fell silent across the battlefield. Silent ships drifted to a stop. Their weapons went cold. Their engines died. Thousands of vessels, frozen in the void like monuments to a forgotten age on the Last Dawn. Commander Yuna watched the transformation in disbelief. It's over, someone whispered. They stopped. They all stopped. Yuna looked at the command vessel where Taiho had been. She knew he was gone. She had known from the moment he volunteered. "Captain," she said softly, "you did it." The celebrations lasted for days. On every human world, people gathered in the streets. They cheered. They cried. They held each other. The war was over. The darkness had been defeated. Life would continue. The allied species celebrated too. Villani and Kalori and Drenathi, together with humans for the first time in history. They shared food and stories and laughter. Old enemies became new friends, but not everyone celebrated. 1 year later, Commander Yuna Park stood at the memorial on Luna. It was a simple wall stretching across the gray surface of the moon. On it were carved 2.3 million names. Every soldier, every civilian, every person who had died in the war. She found Taiho's name near the end. She touched the letters cold beneath her fingers. Ambassador Do-Yun Lee approached from behind. "They're calling us the Guardians now," he said. "The species that stood when everyone else ran. There's talk of building a permanent alliance. Something that can never be dissolved again." Yuna nodded but did not speak. "You should be there," Do-Yun continued. "At the ceremony. You're a hero. I don't feel like a hero." Yuna turned to face him. "I feel tired. And old. And sad." Do-Yun understood. He felt the same way. Victory had a weight to it, heavy with all the people who had not lived to see it. "Why did we do it?" Yuna asked quietly. "We were the youngest species in the galaxy. The weakest. We could have run. We should have run. Why didn't we?" Do-Yun thought about the question for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Because we're human," he said. "Running isn't in our nature. When everyone else sees a reason to flee, we see a reason to fight. It's stupid. It's dangerous. It gets a lot of us killed." He looked at the wall of names. "But it's who we are." Yuna closed her eyes. She thought about Ji-Wan, who had died protecting a refugee transport in the final battle. She thought about Minho, who had lost his arm pulling wounded soldiers from a burning ship. She thought about all the ordinary people who had done extraordinary things, simply because they refused to give up. "I suppose you're right," she said. Admiral Hana Choi's voice echoed across the memorial. "Broadcast to every world in the new alliance. Today we remember not what humanity did, but what it chose to be. When the universe asked if we would stand or fall, we chose to stand. When we were offered survival through cowardice, we chose courage. We did not know if we would win. We only knew that we would fight. On 100 worlds, billions of beings listened. The war is over," Hannah continued. "The darkness has passed, but let us never forget the price we paid. Let us honor those who gave everything so that others could live. And let us remember always that hope is not a weakness. It is the greatest strength we have." The memorial fell silent. Yuna opened her eyes. Beside her, a young Villani with golden eyes stepped forward. Ori had survived the war. He now wore an allied uniform, his shoulders bearing the marks of a lieutenant. "They asked me once why humans stayed," he said. "I told them it was because you didn't know how to run." He paused. "I was wrong. What do you mean?" Yuna asked. Ori looked at the stars above them. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was healing. Life was returning to worlds that had been dark. Children were being born who would never know war. "You stayed because you believed," he said. "You believed that standing together was better than running alone. You believed that protecting others was worth dying for. You believed that the universe was worth saving." He turned to face her. "And you made us believe it too." Yuna smiled for the first time in months. "Perhaps years." "Then it was worth it," she said. "All of it." The stars shone above them, bright and beautiful. For the first time in a long while, the galaxy was not afraid, because somewhere out there, in the darkness between worlds, humanity still stood watch, and they always would.